All right, shalom and welcome. Today we are going to go over the tabernacle. The tabernacle in the wilderness. What Yahweh had Moshe and the children build. Let's go to Exodus 25 and 1. And Yahweh said to Moshe, "Speak to the people of Israel that they may take for me a contribution. From every man whose heart moves him, you shall receive the contribution for me. And this is the contribution that you shall receive from them: gold, silver, and bronze, blue and purple, and scarlet yarns, and fine twined linen, goat's hair, tanned ram's skins, goat skins, Arcadia wood." So all these things he said to bring into him, right? So we see the things that they brought. And they brought so much that he had to tell them to stop. And this again is a free will offering, a free will of what they brought. We have the lid of atonement. Atone means to cover, to cancel, to cleanse, forgive, be merciful, pardon, purge, reconcile. The mercy seat. Now, who do you think represents sitting in the middle of the mercy seat? Yahweh, of course, right? We'd also have to understand that Yahshua is in here. So, putting this all together, we're going to go through the tabernacle, the things of the tabernacle, what's in the tabernacle, around the tabernacle, and we're going to try to figure out what all this means, what all this represents. We pretty much know that they would come once a year to do atonement, right? So on that lid, they would come and do atonement. So real clearly, first of all, we see Yahshua. Knowing Yahweh never changes. Knowing Yahweh is the same yesterday, today, and forever. Knowing that they said, "Oh, I've waited on you, oh Yahshua." They've waited on their salvation. Yes, back in the Old Testament, that they're talking about Yahshua. Then it's talking about in Ezekiel, about the different things. Well, before we get too far, let's just keep on going. And we're trying to understand not only the tabernacle, but its purpose, what's in it, what things represent. But instead of trying to make different, I believe in putting some things together as they go, because the tabernacle is very, very important. It's very important to understand. And if you make one video about the tabernacle and then another about the Messiah and then another about, if you're not careful, it's kind of gets scattered, I believe. So this, I'm trying to mix in the Messiah, Yahshua, the tabernacle, and all the utensils, everything, what it represents and what it represents in Yeshua's time and what it will represent further. So let's see if we connect all these dots and see how far we can find it, where we can go. Because we know the lamb and we know the priest would come into there once a year on the 10th day, on the Day of Atonement. And that is why I submit to you that as well, that the calendars do matter. People say, well, the dates don't matter. Well, if the date doesn't matter on the 10th of Atonement, you just missed Atonement. You just missed the tabernacle. You just missed what he said to miss. So putting it all together, and yes, Yahweh, as we see, wants perfection. Because he didn't send his son, Yahshua, the Lamb, for our atonement so we could sin. So we see very clearly what's going on, what's happening. Let's move forward and see. Yahshua came. And when he came, he said, "Behold, the Spirit, the Ruach of Yahweh is upon me." And he said all this is fulfilled. This is where we get it mixed up. Or the church, I should say, churchianity, gets it mixed up, that what was fulfilled is the lamb sacrifice. What was fulfilled is the blood atonement. What is being fulfilled is what he is doing, who he is, all those scriptures of who they said he was, not himself. He came to do his Father's business, right? So doing his Father's business, he was doing the priest, and he was doing the high priest. Instead of bringing abominable things in there, instead of selling and doing all the abominable things they was doing, he came to set the stuff straight. He came to show them the tabernacle. Now we also have to realize, when we're speaking of this tabernacle, we're speaking of the tabernacle above. So is it above, so shall it be below. Vice versa, right? When we pray, we can bind things and he will bind them in heaven. We can loose blessings, we can loose things, and they will be loosed here. The problem that we come into over and over and over is very few prophets. And the ones that are the prophets, most people don't want to hear them. And the world can easily shove them underneath the rug and say, no views for you, buddy. We don't like what you got to say. It's no different than what we see on sitcoms. If you love Married with Children and everybody likes it, and it, guess what? It's a big deal. Everybody talks about it. But if it's something else that nobody's ever heard of, get rid of it. The same thing through history. So Yahshua come to do what? To put his blood as an everlasting sacrifice. He talks of the bulls and goats and the blood and the different things. So he came to shed his blood so that we could be atoned for. But again, make no mistake about it. If we do not get this right, if we don't come, I believe, on the right dates, if we don't do what he says, then what are we? Are we no different than the Pharisees, the Sadducees, and even worse? We're making up our own religion. We're making up our own traditions. We're making up our own laws. And we get to say, so essentially we become our own God. Because I say I can do this. I say I can do this. And I say I can do that. And we're taking the very blood and making it null and void. Not that we can, but what he says is if you continue in sin, there is no sacrifice for you. This is the words of Yahweh. So we have to be careful when we say we're going to do it our way, or the church continue churchianity. I keep saying that because the church is the church. There is still the assembly of Yahweh. There still is the people in the congregation of Yahweh. And they still atone. They still have his blood. They still have his witness. The problem becomes is when people say, I go to church and it's on Sunday and it's doing this and they're doing everything but what he said to do. Now, moving on. The great earthquake. What's this got to do with the tabernacle? Everything. Just hold on there. We're getting there. Yahshua, and it was a stake, not this, but trying to find the different pictures and put this together. It was a stake. Yahshua was crucified on a stake. Now it said when they hid the ark, Solomon in his temple, they hid it underneath here. For the atonement, for this to work, the atonement has to be upon the ark. The blood was upon the ark. It was sprinkled upon the ark, right? Of the covenant. And Yahweh in a pillar of fire and his Shekinah glory would come down, and that was the atoning power. They even say that the scarlet thread would turn white. Yahweh can do anything. So, is that really unbelievable? I'm sure there was some type of sign, because the priest didn't die, because they didn't die. There was a sign that he accepted that blood. He accepted that until the next year. Now, moving forward, if that had to be, and Yahweh does not change, I am Yahweh, that is my name. I do not change, therefore ye sons of Jacob are not consumed. If he doesn't change, then why would he change here? This is what Christianity teaches. It's all changing. It's changing. It's changing. It's changing till we don't know what we're looking at. But if it doesn't change, then Yeshua's blood came down on the right side of the ark and touched the ark. He, as the perfect lamb, as the sacrifice, came down on the ark. What was the great earthquake about? Well, the great earthquake opened up the earth where his blood could go down and go into and top of the ark. Make sense? So it came down into the ark, and then the whole world's sins are atoned for. Now this is where we get back into the tabernacle. This is a form of the Ark of the Covenant. What was in the ark? The manna. See, the ark itself is a container of what? A container of witnesses. The bud, right? The branch that budded, the manna, and the commandments. 3 witnesses we have in a box. Why was it a box? What do we put in a box? What does it look like? Kind of like a coffin, right? It was what we know as a coffin. So wouldn't it make sense that he was trying to show us for the future something's going to happen and there's something else missing because we got this great big box and we put this stuff in the side. What else are we going to put in this box? Behold hand, behold nail. Folks, they should have seen this coming for a mile. They should have known what was happening. And maybe, probably, the prophets did. When they prophesied that there's one that's going to come and he's going to be perfect and he's going to shed his blood for all the world. Well, if you know the atonement, if you know the tabernacle, if you know what's in the tabernacle, if you know how the tabernacle works, you see what I'm getting at? If you know all this is representation of being inside the camp, outside the camp, it's all representation of atonement for your sins. It's representation of Yahweh. It's representation of Yeshua. Who are these? Why is the point? What's the point of the angels on top of it? Have you ever seen the 2 witnesses? Yahweh himself is so justified, is so much into justice, that is so much into right ruling. He says, let us go down and see about Sodom and Gomorrah. Let us go down and see if what those prayers and what they're saying. Let us go down and judge it rightfully and see if all that abomination they're talking about is happening. So what do you think is going to happen to this world before he sends his wrath? Probably the exact same thing. What did he say when he made man? Let us make man. So these angels are more than just cherubs on a golden box. These angels are his witnesses. These angels, Gabriel and Michael, are going to come again. And these are the 2 witnesses. They're going to come upon this earth. Same as the beginning as in the ending. Nothing under the sun. Nothing changes. If we would learn and know our Bible, we wouldn't be so duped. We wouldn't be so taught wrong, because we couldn't be, because we would say, no, no, no. This is what I'm looking for. Instead of Jonathan Kahn getting on there and saying, oh, you know what, the 4 blood moons and this and this and this and this and this and all that nonsense. And we go, ooh, that sounds tasty. I like that little morsel. That sounds great. In 2020, and nothing happens. In 2015, nothing happens. And who cares of the blood moon? It's not a blood moon. That itself is a false statement. It's not blood. It's red. It's orange. It's yellow. It's no different if it happened before. It will probably happen again. If the world didn't fall apart then, it probably won't fall apart now. We can't change things to make it fit our nonsense. A blood moon is a one-time occurrence. When it turns to blood, we're going to watch it. We're going to see it. We're going to know it. So, these two witnesses, Gabriel and Michael, are the witnesses of Yahweh. And that's why they're here. Because they are witnessing every year of atonement. Is this blood defiled? Or is your blood straight? Or is your blood corrupted? Life is in the blood, folks. He chose these animals to atone for us. But Yahshua come to atone for us. So don't you think that maybe these two angels was right there with Yahshua? That they had to make sure and confirm that this was a witness that Yeshua's blood, Yahshua himself was pure, and he was worthy as the high priest to take away our sins. Isn't that amazing? Maybe you've never heard that. But it's amazing that Yahweh does things, and if we're taught right, if they was taught right, they probably seen these things coming. They yearn for seeing Yahshua, and most of them never seen him, obviously. So when that glory came upon there, now what does this got to do with Yahshua? Well, there is the, what is it? The Turin, the shawl of Yahshua. And I've run into people who said that they have seen it. They had pictures of it. And when Yahshua was laying there, they placed that blanket, they placed that cloth around him, right? He went and took him to the rich man's tomb. He took him down and he went and put him in his tomb. When they put him in there, they're saying that it would take like a nuclear bomb, a quick instant of a flash, to put that on that shawl, to put that facing, to put his outline. It would be like a nuclear bomb went off in his body to make that happen. We see that the fire of Yahweh would come down. We see that the glory, the Shekinah glory of Yahweh would come down into the tabernacle, that a very pillar of fire they would follow, that they would see. So is it so unreasonable to say that when Yahshua died, when this happened, when his blood came down, the exact same thing happened as the exact same thing always happened when they had the tabernacle? Why did it not happen in the temple? Because it was corrupted. Yahshua shows us their temple, their priest, and their priest handing over Yahshua to Pilate. If that ain't corruption, folks, you handed over an innocent man. He should have been put to death. He didn't do anything. Yahshua was innocent according to Pilate's own mouth. I find nothing guilty. I find no fault. I find nothing wrong with this man. And they cried, crucify him anyway. Folks, wow. Again, they should have known. The pot of manna, the Commandment, 613. Remember, it's front and back in sapphire stone. And we're all going to see this. Again, we're grown, we're taught that we don't have to do nothing but have faith. But he is a visual Elohim. He is a visual. They seen it. We are going to see it. We're going to see that rod of Aaron. We're going to see that it budded. We're going to see these things. And we're going to see the very ark. I don't think I would touch it. I don't think I'd get around it. I don't think I would do anything other than what you're supposed to do. All these people, I can come down to the veil. I can come into the veil. I can do. You better be careful what you think you can do. Because that fire of Yahweh, and if you read here, it talks of the things that they brought had to go through the fire, right? And see that you make them after the pattern for them which is being shown to you on the mountain. Exodus 25 and 40. He told him to make this what he's shown to him on the mountain. Now, some of these things we can put together. Some of these things we can vividly see. We can have the dimensions, if you will, what it was made of, and some things. So, what we have to understand, though, is in the time of Moses. Yahweh gave these without a planner, without a booklet, without tablets, to Moshe only. Do you know why? Because if he would have gave him a booklet, guess what would have probably happened? Aaron, Miriam, who else might have come down and said, we can build this. Go sit down, old man. Yahweh knows what he's doing. So I would suggest to you that everybody looking for the great Exodus, part 2, if you will, that if Yahweh dedicates one man, like he did with Moshe, we're going to have to stop the murmuring, complaining, whining, and I can read my Bible myself, because it's not going to work. It's not going to work. If everything happens just like it did then, everybody wants to get back to this or get on with that, but if everything happens like it did in the wilderness and tabernacles, and one man is appointed, how many people is going to die right from the get-go? 3,000, 10,000, 3 million? How many people are going to die right in the beginning? How many? How many is going to be the example? Don't let it be you. Beloved, don't let it be you. Because if we see what happened then, and that's going to be a pale comparison of what this is. We're not even going to talk about that Exodus anymore. We're going to talk about this Exodus. Can you imagine? We're just basically going to forget about that Exodus, that tabernacle, what they did, because this one's going to be so much more. I would submit to you that if you're a murmuring, complaining, I can read my Bible for myself type of person, you better start learning there's prophets and there's people, and if Yahweh's called them, not a false prophet, stay thee far away from the false prophet. But if Yahweh's called the prophet, you better get yourself into training that if Yahweh says so, you better listen. Because if you're one of those ones that says, hey, I can read my Torah, and it's the true prophet, and it's the true Exodus, you just failed. And no telling what. If he's going to swallow up, usually he does a new thing on these things, right? He did a new thing to prove himself there. So let's go on. Hebrews 8 and 5. They serve a copy and a shadow of the heavenly things. For when Moses was about to erect the tent, he was instructed by Elohim, saying, see that you make everything according to the pattern that was shown to you on the mountain. Right? Now let's go and talk a little bit more about what was made. Exodus 38 and 8. He made the basin of bronze and its stand of bronze from the mirrors of the ministering women who ministered in the entrance of the tent of meeting. Right? We have to understand that these things was not only made, they was made to be mobile. The stakes, the ropes, all the parts, as beautiful as it was, the fence, all these had to be mobile. And they had to be sturdy enough to withstand the desert, the wilderness. So it had to be, we can take it down, we can put it up. We can take it down, we can put it up. So these was not cavemen as the world has us to believe. These, if you've ever been in a tent, if you've ever been in the wilderness, if you've ever taken a tent up and down a few times, it has to be sturdy or it's junk. And it falls apart. And it's just not fun to work with, right? So the outer gate of the tabernacle, it had poles and it had the fence to keep people away. Because people, that is another thing. Yahweh's always trying to keep us away from harm. If you'll see the whole fence around it. Because no one could withstand his glory. No one can stand in his presence without his permission. Moshe, the high priest, Aaron, they have to be bidden to come. In this world, sadly, we don't have to think we do anything. We think we're going to come straight to the king and his throne and talk to him and do this and do that, which we can pray. Don't get me wrong. But if we're not guarded, if our mouth isn't right, if our mind isn't right, if we come to him any old way and forget he's the king, that's why he has put fences up for us. That's the whole point of this tabernacle and atonement is before you come to me, cleanse yourself. Before you come to me, Teshuvah. Before you come to me, make sure your mouth is right. The fence pillars stand in bronze sockets. Bronze represents his judgment. He has set a day when he will judge the world with fairness. He's not going to again, even though he's Yahweh, and he has every right to judge any way he wants to, he still uses Michael and Gabriel. He still has them as his right and left hand angels. And they're going to come. It's not going to be Elijah. It's not going to be, that's reincarnation. Nowhere do we see Elijah and this one and that. We hear of that because we have to comprehend it. But it's not Elijah. Just like Yahshua wasn't Elijah. Yochanan was not Elijah. The Spirit, that force, that I will not back down, I will go to my death, you will cut my head off, and that's that. That Spirit, not the person. Because if it's the person, we're talking reincarnation. Now for being perfect, Elijah gets to come back and be killed in the street. No. Is that justice? No way is that justice. I lived a perfect, circumspect life. You carried me away. I didn't know death. And you're going to bring me back and kill me in front of the world? Come on, folks. Don't buy that kind of stuff. And Moses, he died. We know he died. He couldn't make it to the promised land. Is he going to come back? That's reincarnation. Well, who else do we got? Enoch? Again, for perfection, for living, for being close to Yahweh? Come on. We got to stop with the traditions of men and what people say. That's not righteous judgment. That is not righteous judgment. So then what do you get if you mess up? You get to go in hell and be dipped in, thrown back out, brought back, killed in front of everybody, brought back, thrown in hell, and then nuked in the face? Man, them people got it coming. See, there's one life, and what we do with it is what we will be judged for. Good or bad, every word that comes out of our mouth. And this is what it represents even from the outside. This is before you even come to meet with Yahweh, before you even come into his presence, you're going to be judged that you're even worthy to come within the tabernacle. Right? And we see this in the ending too in Revelations, that those pagans, those Gentiles, they are going to tread down the outside courts, but they're not going to be worthy to come within the tabernacle gates. So this is how they was made. They had, again, to put this in the wilderness and take it down. It couldn't be some flimsy, junky things like we go get it Walmart. Used to be Kmart, right? Used to be this, used to be there. But it's not this flimsy junk that breaks. It's got to be sturdy to withstand. And Yahweh himself showed Moshe how to make it. Again, there's so much in Yahweh told and showed Moshe. Moshe showed them. There's so much in that, folks. But this is what it is. You have the base, and then you have the parts that went on the board, and then when you have the very top. Because remember, this had to be carried. It couldn't be so 40 foot long and everything so bad. It had to be carried by men. And yes, there was many, but it still had to be broken down and carried by these men, by the people that was there, right? So the pure white linen fence. The fence is formed of pure white barrier around the house of Elohim. Make a courtyard for the holy tent. These curtains must be made from fine linen. The white fence kept out the impure. The Israelites, if kept Elohim's tent only. They was on the outside. Why was they on the outside? Because Yahweh knew they was impure of heart. They murmured, they complained. They still had so much of Egypt in them that it was hard to talk to them, to teach them, to get them to be right. So what they had was, again, a fence that they knew better than come into. This was only for those priests. This was only for the holy. But what they should have been doing is watching and listening and learning from Moshe and learning from Aaron and learning what's going on. You know, I know it's real easy for us to say the Shekinah, the glory of Yahweh, the power of Yahweh, the fire of Yahweh, and to see and to hear his voice. These people heard his voice. I asked somebody today, do you hear from Yahweh? You know, people try to say this and try to say that, but have you heard from Yahweh? If you don't hear Yahweh's voice, then you need to find somebody who does, and not somebody who claims he hears it every day. I heard from God and he told me. No, not that nonsense. Yahweh says, and it doesn't have to, we have to understand, I think we are almost like the people in the wilderness. We don't see it because we don't have a tabernacle. We don't have the one prophet. We don't have, but we're all scattered. We're all scattered, and can we even come inside the camp? Are we even worthy? Because we all say, I can read my Bible. I know what my Bible says. I know what my church says. My pastor tells me. Are we any better than these people? Are we any more worthy? Are we any more humble? This means everything. This should be taught. I have this that I love to teach, a little model of it. And it's got the little cattle and the little priest and the little things. And, you know, I love to teach about what Yahweh has set forth because it hasn't changed. The only thing that's changed was the way that atonement was done. And he told us that he didn't glorify in goats and bulls. He said this. He said he didn't want your sacrifice. It was because of the sin is why the sacrifice and is why Yahshua had to come. Isn't it sad that most of us are not even worthy to come even within the inner court, and most of us probably wouldn't even be worthy to come into the gate. Until we teshiva, until we accept Yahweh, until we keep the Sabbath day. He says, I will be your Elohim, and you will be my people. But that's keeping the Sabbath. And then keeping that, we learn and we glean, and we have, just like they had, 40 years to learn. 40 years to figure it out. 40 years, maybe that's what we get. Maybe that's the time that we have to figure it out for all those who come into this late. Maybe we have those 40 years to figure it out. It seems like a long time. Seems like, oh man, I can do it all. But can we? Will we? Dare we? Yahweh help us. We have the poles and how they put the things together. Again, these had to break apart and they had to be sturdy for the winds and even people, and people dropping them. You know, this is a practical solution. This ain't just everybody was perfect. I'm sure these people tripped and fell, and donkeys fell over, and all kinds of things happened. So it had to be so sturdy that people wouldn't just tear it up. So they went down, as you see here, and these stabilizers, if you will, went through the rings to hold it up, and then they went into these sockets. So what we have to understand is see how it all goes together? And now we'll get some more into a little bit of dimensions of what it was. You have the bars, as you see, and the little rings would hold the bars, which would hold them together to keep them from flopping this way and that way. The little sockets that went on the bottom to put these into were silver sockets. Then you have the Temans, and these boards were 15 foot high. 15 foot. That's more than your ceiling usually. Unless you have a big place, usually our ceilings are 8 to 10 foot. Most modern places, I think, are 8, a little bit over 8. So 15 foot high is what they were. So we go on and we see the covering of the tabernacle. Now this was probably a little bit of support. That's why the silver and why the gold and why it all had to be sturdy as well, because they're the 4 coverings that went over these, right? You have the coverings that went over to hold it up and to keep everything out, and including the people, and of course their nice prying eyes, right? The way that people love to look at things and, try to be nosy and see what's really going on. We'll get a little bit closer view here. You have, it says here sea cows, but there's not sea cows, it's cows or deer. You have ram skin, goat's hair, and fine twined linen. The reason it can't be a sea cow or manatee or any of that thing is because they're unclean. Yahweh does not use anything unclean, and he knows anything unclean, just like it is written, cannot produce something clean. So, cows, oxen, deer, but not something. So we have to, but I'd like to throw that in there because in some versions of Bibles and some people say this, but I want you to learn and to know and defend the word of Yahweh and to know that Yahweh does not work with the unclean. So, I don't try to hide something, because I think if you hide something, then you're hurting the people. Because then when somebody comes up and says, oh, no, it's a sea cow, or no, it's a, there's another one, I think gopher, or there's something in there, I forget what it is, but I think they said there's a gopher or beaver, or there's all kinds of things that people say. But if it's not clean, trust me, trust Yahweh, it was not a part of his tabernacle. Now, going forward, this is how it's set. Northeast, southwest. They had to know, again, they were not cave-dwelling people. They were not ignorant people. They knew where north, east, south, and west was, and they knew how this worked out. They knew what they was looking at. They had to, because he told them to, right? So he told them what was what. So we'll see here, we have the bronze, the laver, the table of showbread, the altar of incense, and the ark in the Holy of Holies. You have the 7-branch lampstand, the light, Yahshua. The bread is the word of Yahweh. Give me this day our daily bread. We're not talking about food. Yahweh really doesn't care that much for food as we think he does. He's not really much interested in the food, other than you'll be sufficed. Because he says, man does not live alone by bread, but man lives by every word that proceedeth out of the mouth of Yahweh. He's talking about, and what's represented is the bread, the word, Yahshua. The light of the world, Yahshua. The altar of incense, all the saints, all the incense, our prayers are incense. Our prayers come up before Yahweh. Our prayers are sent to Yahweh. Again, who carries, we forget about the most important things that happen. The angels carry our prayers to Yahweh. And he hears our prayers, and he either answers them or he doesn't. He either denies them. All the prayers of the saints come up before Yahweh. And all the prayers of the saints come up before Yahweh. And one of those prayers in Revelations, when are you going to vengeance for us, Yahweh? When are you, all the mortals, all the saints, all the people who have died for the name of Yahweh, for his word, for his testimony, are crying out. Their blood, their body is crying out. Remember how Cain and Abel, and the blood cried out from the earth? That blood's crying out. They're still crying out. See, we forget things that we've been taught, or we just think for some reason it just magically disappears. It's like a cereal, magically delicious. No, it's not. It's facts. It's what it is. Now it says there's 150 foot long, about the size of a football field is what we're talking about, right? So let's go a little bit farther. The dimensions of the altar. The altar, it was the largest piece of furniture. It was 5 cubits long, 5 cubits broad, and 3 cubits high. 5, the number of responsibility. One who must meet every responsibility, live perfect. See, again, all this keeps talking about perfection. Perfection, perfection. You come to the water, you're immersed. You come to the laver, you're immersed. They wash themselves, they cleanse themselves. But you can't cleanse sin. You can only wash off the dirt and the grime and the things of the world. Only Yahshua can cleanse you. Only the fire, only the testing trials, only them things will prove what you are and what you ain't. This is what's represented at this altar. They would burn the bulls, the goats, the free will offerings, and it was tested and put in the fire. One who met the responsibility and lived perfect, fulfilled all the prophets, fulfilled all the prophecies, finished his work. The altar is the 4 square. It's amazing. What is another 4 square thing? There's 4 horns on this altar. If you notice, you barely see them, but there's 4 horns on this altar. 4 corners, 4 angels. 4 could be representing another thing that we went over before, right? The earth itself. He comes and he washes away the blood, the mire, the sin of the earth. Yahweh does. His 4 angels, the 4 corners of the earth. He's going to bring us all again from the 4 corners of the earth, the ones that he has scattered. He's going to bring us back. Isn't that amazing? It's just amazing in the tabernacle of how much, I believe, intricate, how much things that was in the tabernacle, that they was too busy murmuring, complaining about lynx and melons and all this junk. They was looking at the future. They was looking at Yahshua. They was looking at Yahweh. They was too busy about melons, lynx. Oh, in Egypt, guess what we had? Oh, in Egypt, you have Yahweh. But if we're not careful, what do we do today? Oh, if I lived over here, if I did this, if I did... Now, don't get me wrong. Some people are wrong in what they're living. Some people are doing wrong in how their lives are. Some people are doing terribly wrong, and they think they're right because they thought they heard, or some prophetess or somebody told them, or something said something, and they think that they're on the right path. But folks, many people, according to Matthew 7, the word of Yahweh, many will say to me in that day, and I will say to them, depart from me, I never knew you. The same thing we see that these people had to wander for 40 years because of disobedience. Pure disobedience. All they had to do was take the land. But they didn't. So they had to wander. It was their own fault. Nobody else's. He never told them to wander for 40 years or disobey him or murmur and complain. He said, go and take the land. Take it. I would submit to you today, what are we doing? We hide here, we hide there, we go to church, we sit in our own comfy zone. Are we taking the land? Are we taking the land back? Are we taking and putting up the tabernacle? Are we the tabernacle? If you're the tabernacle, then nothing that we read in the scriptures can come there. People say, well, I'm now the tabernacle. Well, if that's true, then nothing unclean, anything that you see that he doesn't want in his tabernacle, doesn't belong in you, on you, smoking in you, another incense. Can you have a foreign incense? If you're the tabernacle, think about that. Is smoking okay? Is smoking weed okay? Is doing this? Is that a strange incense if you're the tabernacle? Absolutely it is. It was not permitted then. Oh, no, it was not permitted. We have proof. We know frankincense, myrrh, You don't see people smoking that, putting it in their pipe and smoke it. Proof of what is compared to tradition of what I want to do. So, moving on, we see, are we worthy to come within this tabernacle? Are we worthy to come and talk with Yahweh? Are we worthy of salvation? Let's go on. Inside the tabernacle, what do we have here? If we look, we see the offering, right? We see what they had. We see that they had these places to receive the offering. And we see what had to happen. So, you have the Holy of Holies, the Ark, the veil, the altar of incense, the lampstand, the menorah, the 7 branch one, the holy place, the table of showbread, and the outer veil. So these is what they had. The curtain enclosure, and there's only one way in this place. The east gate. Tabernacle coverings and curtains. The outer covering, oh, there it is, badger skins, right? It says badger skins. That's what I was looking for earlier. That it's not, again, badger. That it is cow. It is deer. Covering of ram skin, and they dyed it red. And then the curtain of goat's hair, and then the curtain of fine linen, right? Not the John type. Oh, we got to have some fun, folks. Yahweh forgive us. But what we have to do is understand what's going on and what we're looking at and why it was there. So the tabernacle itself, we see what it had inside. It had all these things, the ark, the menorah, those poles that you see, the cut-off view of it, right? You see that the poles that was there, the coverings over it, the tent itself, the curtains. The entire tent was 45 feet long by 15 feet wide and 15 feet high, just like we went over before. So now we're going to put it all together. The 15-foot high was those boards, which made it 15 feet, right? The entire tent was 45 feet long. It was a wooden skeletal structure overlaid with gold, with solid roof, front wall, 5 wooden bars overlaid with gold, pass-through rings attached to each frame, like I showed you earlier, those pass-through rings, and what them bars held those golden beams covered with wood, right? The frame structure was covered by 4 layers of cloth, Exodus 26, 1 through 4. Now this is where we start getting into the tabernacle cloth is what? The skin of it. How many layers of skin do we have? You see where it's going into? This, I would submit to you, is something that we have, and it's a forever thing. It's not something, a lot of people look at it as something that happened, something that they had then, but today it's kind of no, what is it today? What does it matter today? What is it? The most holy place was 15 foot, containing only the Ark of the Covenant. This is Exodus 25, 10 through 22, and 37, 1 through 9. It was there that Yahweh would descend to meet with his people in a cloud, the divine appearance of Yahweh. The high priest could enter only once a year on the Day of Atonement. Hebrews 9 and 7. The table for the bread was the presence, was Exodus 25, 23 through 30. And the holy place of the tabernacle tent was 30 feet long, 15 feet wide, and 15 feet high. So there are your schematics, if you will. There is what it says of what it is. So we have to be very careful when we go and do something and say, my skin, and what I put on my skin, what I tattoo my skin with, what I shampoo myself with. Because if we're going to say we are the tabernacle, and the skin represents our skin, there's another teaching I did a while back about that skin. Our skin is overlaid. The Ruach is within us. The Ruach should be visited by Yahweh. Yahweh's very Ruach should come inside of us. When that happens, we should be changed. We should be atoned for. We should have all these things. So going on, you have again the tabernacle. You have the Ark of the Covenant, the menorah, the altar, where they washed the laver. And if you notice again what it looks like, what the things are, I know it looks kind of crude there, but these are what consisted of it. The table of the showbread. So what we have to understand is, again, putting all this stuff together and looking at what it really was. We'll go through some more here. The outer court was 150 foot by 75 foot. The tabernacle itself, 45 foot by 15 foot tall. The most holy place was 30 foot by 15 foot. And the Holy of Holies was 15 by 15. Now, again, not just everybody walked into this place. They kept the menorah burning, the 7-candle menorah. Now, if we go into Revelations, what is those 7 candles? What is the 7 Ruachs, the 7 spirits, the 7 Ruachs of Yahweh? What do they represent? The 7 angels of Yahweh, the 7 churches of Yahweh. Again, this is not just the tabernacle in the wilderness. This is a representation of Yahshua, atonement, and I would say the tabernacle in Revelation, the tabernacle of forever. This has a very, very, very importance to it. And most people and the enemy wants you to do away with it, right? Most churchianity says, do away with this. What's this? That's Old Testament stuff. It has nothing to do with today. I would submit to you it has everything to do with today. Because if we don't know what we're doing, we don't know what we're looking at, we don't know what's going on, Yahweh forgive us, we're in trouble, right? So let's go forward and see what else we have. Oh, before we go too far, the veil. Coming into the veil in the presence of Yahweh, the most holy place. We have to know, again, we don't come to Him any other way. We come and we repent, and we come to Him and we say, Yahweh, forgive us. You know, we say dumb things. We do dumb things. We try to make comments and do things, but Yahweh, forgive us of even those things. So this is another cutaway of what it would look like and what they had and what it was. Because, again, when we go in, we see the holy place with the table of bread, the lampstand, and the altar of incense. The length with 20 cubits are 30 feet, with 10 cubits, which is 15 feet. It's 100 cubits or 150 feet long. The entrance was 20 cubits or 30 feet. We have the altar. The first thing, once you make it in the gate, right? You have the altar, the burnt offering, and then you have the laver. Then you go into the tabernacle itself. And the first entrance in there is 20 cubits, and then inside is 10 cubits. The width across it is 50 cubits. The most holy place with the Ark of the Covenant was 10 cubits square or 15 square. And you had the curtain that went in between there from the Holy of Holies. So this was a very intricate thing. This was something very, very well made, very well put together. It wasn't just something that, you know, they threw together. It was something that it took a lot of time, it took a lot of effort, it took a lot to put together. And then, when they had it together, they was ready to do the sacrifices. They was ready to do the atonement. They was ready to hear what so said Yahweh. They was ready to see the presence of Yahweh. But even at this, again, the people, most, was on the outside. The different tribes of this was on the outside. If we see here, We have Dan, Asher, Naphtali, right? And we see what was outside, again, the tabernacle. And a lot of times, if we're not careful, that's where we are. That's where we end up. That's where that we ourselves end up, as being on the outside here. Now again, the altar of incense, it was 1.5 by 1.5, the altar itself, the ark, the table of showbread, 3 by 1.5, what everything consisted of and what it actually is. So we have to know this was very, very intricate. It was very put together, and it was more a precise thing than just thrown up. It wasn't something that they just put together. Go forward. Ezekiel 44:6. And thou shalt say to the rebellious, even to the house of Israel, thus saith Yahweh Elohim, O house of Israel, let it suffice you of all your abominations. Here we go. Now we're going to start finding out other verses that is talking about more of the tabernacle, more of the gate, more of what we're doing here, right? So why is there only one way in? Why is there only one way into the tabernacle? Because Yahshua is the only way. He's the only way to the Father. He is the only way to the Father. Ezekiel 44:2. Trying to get too fast here. 44:2. Then said Yahweh unto me, this gate shall be shut, it shall be opened, and no man shall enter in by it, because Yahweh, the Elohim of Israel, hath entered in by it, therefore shall it be shut. Wait a minute. This gate's closed, and nobody can come in but the high priest. Now we're talking about a gate that shall be shut, and it shall not be opened, and no man shall enter in by it, because Yahweh, the Elohim of Israel, hath entered in by it. Therefore it shall be shut. Who came in to the east gate? On a donkey. Who came in to the east gate while they cried, Hosanna, Hosanna, Hosanna to the highest? Was it not Yahshua? And it's talking about the gate is shut. Now it's shut. Now no man can enter in. Now you're not coming in. Could it be, as we see all through history, could it possibly be that Adam and Eve sinned? The children sinned. Noah sinned. That it's been such a sinful nation, such a sinful world, that now, just like he says, the gate's closed. Now you're going to Yahshua. You're not coming to the gate. You're coming to talk to Yahshua. The gate has been closed. If you don't come to Yahshua, there's no atonement. There is no way around it. Oh, but I go to church. Oh, but I live good. Oh, but every funeral that you've ever heard of, the guy's been a great guy. The woman has been the best mother, the best this, the best that, right? But scripturally, can we do it? Ezekiel 44, then he brought me back the way of the gate outward sanctuary, which looked toward the east. This is talking about the sanctuary. Make no mistake about it. This is not talking about a church or a different place. This says specifically, then he brought me back the way of the gate, outward sanctuary, the outward sanctuary, which looked toward the east. And it was shut. What eastern gate do we know of? That there's only one. There's only one eastern gate here, folks. And this eastern gate is that one that we seen in the tabernacle. Could he be talking about the very same tabernacle, if you will, the heavenly tabernacle, that there's only one gate? There's only one way. Then said Yahweh unto me, this gate shall be shut, it shall be open, and no man shall enter in by it, because Yahweh, the Elohim of Israel, hath entered in by it. Wow. So could it be that he's saying, this way, since Yahshua has came, you know, the world says the opposite. Come one, come all. Let's all come into the house and the church and the this and the that of that. But it's looking very much so that if we don't come to Yahshua, then there's going to be a problem. If we don't come into the east gate, and we can't come into the east gate, we cannot, according to this, we can't come into the east gate. It's shut. It's closed. And I think this is where a lot of people get the confusion of the Jews and the Jewish, and the Jews are just outside the gate now, and now the Gentiles have, nobody has a right to the gate. Nobody has a right to the atonement. No one can do it unless Yahshua approves. The same thing is old. Isn't that amazing? The same thing as from old. If we don't come to Yahweh and accept Yahshua, there is no gate. There is no tabernacle. There is no glory. There is none of these things, because why? We have to accept the king. We have to accept the high priest. We have to do the same thing that we see done. And the first of all the first fruits of all things, and every oblation of all, and every sort of your obligation shall be the priest. Whose is it? The priest. Yahshua holds it all. It's all Yahshua's. If he's the high priest, which he is, then it's all on him. You shall also give unto the priest of the first of your dough, that you may cause the blessing to rest in thine house. This is Ezekiel. This isn't Exodus. This is Ezekiel. Understand that. A lot of people read this and they think, oh my gosh, we're back in Exodus. No, we're in Ezekiel. We're talking about things that are to come. Things that we are future. Things that was future to them. Right? I know some of these things are mind-blowing, and some of it is just a whole different world, if you will. It's a 20-part teaching on Ezekiel and the millennium and all these things. But no, it hasn't come yet. It couldn't have come yet. Because we see the things haven't happened yet. It's the only way we know is what we see. But we do see Ezekiel, we do see the wheel, we do see all these things that is going to come to pass. Not has happened. Don't be deceived. Don't let someone tell you something. So let's go on. Ezekiel 41, 1-3. Then he brought me back to the outer gate of the sanctuary, which faces toward the east, but it was shut. So obviously this same tabernacle is the heavenly tabernacle. Remember what I said in the beginning? As so it is on earth, so shall it be there, so shall it be here, there. The same, right? In Yahweh's world of perfection, we should be exactly mirrored what he has up there. If Adam and Eve wouldn't have sinned, I believe they still would have built the tabernacle. There still would have been a tabernacle if we didn't enter into that. It still would have mirrored Yahweh's kingdom. He still would have come down just like he talked to Adam, only they would have had the tabernacle, but they wouldn't needed the goats and the bulls and the bloods and all that. Make sense? And Yahweh said to me, this gate shall be shut, it shall not be opened, and no man shall enter in by it. Because Yahweh, the Elohim of Israel, has entered by it, therefore it shall be shut. So, we see, without the atonement of Yahshua, without these things, then we have no redemption. We cannot go and say, I'm redeemed because I'm redeemed. We can't let Pastor Fred tell us we're saved because you got something. Because Yahweh's the one's going to say you're saved or you're not. And he's not even going to say it like that. He's going to say, well done, thou good and faithful servant, or depart from me. There is no other thing said there. Well done, thou good and faithful servant, or depart from me. I never knew you. Who will do it? Elohim himself. Yahweh himself will restore Israel. And when I say Israel, I mean everybody. The 12 tribes, just like what we see. Again, we didn't go over the tribes that much, but the tribes outside the camp represents the tribes outside the camp. Yahweh, consider the tabernacle is Yahweh's throne. Consider the tabernacle as heaven, as the Shelim, where Yahweh dwells. Now do you understand? We can't enter in there until we are atoned for. We can't make it into there until Yahshua, our atonement, has said and been our judge and our advocate and said, no, they are worthy. If not, depart from me, I never knew you. We can't enter the tabernacle. We can't even make it to the court. But Yahweh himself will restore us. Not the Jews, not the Yehuda, not just one tribe. Every tribe. Dan, Naphtali, Issachar, all these tribes, not one. Stop looking at one. Stop looking at Jew and Gentile, because there's tribes and there's pagans. There's heathens and there's believers. That's the way he looks at it. He don't look at it as, oh, well, you know, no. There's believers and there's non-believers. And yes, even if you're a non-believer, untaught, unlearned, you can still learn. Because Yahweh's name is at stake. He made the covenant. See, here's the whole deal. He made the covenant with Abraham. He made the covenant, right? So he's not going to break the covenant. So there has to be a remnant. There has to be those of us who will stand for his name. There has to be the ones blessed by him. He made this covenant and he's going to keep his end. Whether we like it or not. Whether we agree or not. There's always going to be a remnant. Because he said so. Because he made the covenant. So he made the covenant. So he has to keep it. So at the end of times is when we're going to see this happen. At the end of times, well, what's that got to do with me? What's that got to do with the tabernacle? Everything, because the tabernacle has what? The tabernacle had what? The Ark of the Covenant. Covenant, folks. All this comes down to covenants again. I will be your Elohim, you will be my people. But Moshe, you go talk to him because we're going to die. Rightly they said so, because he knew in their hearts they were murmuring, complaining, stiff-necked, non-doing, terrible people. Their flesh. But he still could work with them. He could still, and Moses said what? Yahweh told Moshe, stand back and I will wipe these people out and give you a new people. How many people would have said, okay, next? Come on, husbands, wives, children's, mommies and daddies everywhere. Woo, a better child, a better husband, a better wife, a better... Woo! I'm going to watch this. But Moses said, no, for your name's sake. What will the people say, that you brought them out to the desert to destroy them? Remember, Yahweh, these are your people. Remember, you can make them right. Remember your covenant. One of the best things we can do is say, Father, Yahweh, remember that covenant. If we're a child of Him. If we're not, we don't want. Do we want that covenant? Do we want to be an Amorite, a Hittite, a destroyed one? So make sure you're under the umbrella of the covenant. Make sure you're in the ark. Make sure you're in the tabernacle before you go saying things. Because a lot of people pray damnation. A lot of people standing in these churches are praying to some God and praying for this and praying, oh, those poor Jews, oh, them poor Jews, if they only, and they don't even know what's coming out of their mouth. So we have to be careful. Let's go on. So, we have the way, the east gate. The east gate is the only way in. Do you see how that comes into Ezekiel and what I was talking about? The east gate is the only way into the tabernacle. And you come in through the east gate. You offer on the altar, you wash, and you go in. So, the same thing we see happening over and over and over. My gift is what? What does it say in Romans 12:1? I appeal to you, therefore, brothers, by the mercies of Elohim, to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, set apart and acceptable to Elohim, which is your spiritual worship. A lot of people think their worship and their praise and all this is something, but it's your sacrifice. It's what you do. It's what you are. It's how you approach every day. The structure and the dimensions of the tabernacle. We went over most of these, but here's another cutaway to show where they would come in. This is where they would come in and put their sacrifice on the altar. And then they had the basin to wash and cleanse themselves. So you see how this worked and how it went. And how the size of it was. And the dimensions of it. So we have to be careful again of what exactly we throw out. You know, a lot of times you hear people, well, I'm going to chew up the meat and spit out the bone, or chew up the meat and spit out the fat. But you have to be careful as what you deem is unwanted. What the world is basically condemned and said it's Old Testament. And what Yahweh said, it's still in effect. It's still in order. It's still a part of my plan. So, what do we have here? We have all the tribes encamped around. We have the high priest. We have all the pieces of the tabernacle. We have the ephod, which represents what? All the people, all the tribes, all the ones that was there. So, we have the altar of incense, the showbread, the Ark of the Covenant, the menorah, the laver, the wash basin, and the altar of where they accepted the sacrifice. And again, they was only worthy to come in the east, which Yahshua said, what? There's only one way. Anybody else is a thief. Any other way in is a robber. You see what he's saying? There's only one way to the Father. And now it's Yahshua. There's only one way. Any other way, any other church, any other name, any other thing. You know, folks, we can't go with what we like. I know people that have turned away from this walk because they think Grandmama made it in because she knew Jesus. Now, I'm not judging anyone, and I'm surely not going to judge Grandmama, because we never know what they knew. We don't know what they heard. We don't know what they repented, what they prayed. But it's for us, in such a time as this, and knowing the name of Yahshua, knowing where Yahweh dwells, knowing the east gate is the way to look, knowing that we're looking to the east. All through Scripture we're told to look east. the tabernacle was east. What was they looking for? Why is it always east? Why is it always east? There's got to be something to that. Because when you look east, what do you see? No, not the sunrise. You see the moon. If you look in the eastern sky on a full moon, you'll see, usually about 20 to 45 minutes, depending on the time, you will see a full moon in the eastern sky coming up. Well, what's that got to do with it? Well, if you're telling time, if the priest is commanded to blow the shofar on the 7th month, on the first day of the month, on the Feast of Tabernacles, who sees it? What we see today is people looking west at a third or a no moon or whatever kind of moon they're looking at. Nobody would see that. If you're the priest standing here looking out the eastern gate, are you going to see anything? No. You're not going to see that moon. It's behind you. You're not looking. You're not even looking in that direction. You're not commanded. There's only one way, folks. This is why calendars, everything goes back to the beginning. And if you don't know the beginning, you can't know the ending. If you don't know the beginning, you can't possibly get the calendar straight. You can't get his days straight. You can't get the things right because it's too traditionalized. There's too much Jewish. There's too much Sanhedrins. There's too much everything but what Yahweh commanded. If he said, look to the east, point to the east, always east, we don't look to the right or the left of the east. We don't look to the north or the south. We don't accept any other doctrine but what Yahweh put into order. If we do, it's a different doctrine. If even an angel come and preach another doctrine, most of these things are Islam, Arabic, are pure satanic. Belier stuff. Everybody's worried about Hasatan. You better be worried about Belier, Malak, all these other ones that Yahweh has said to worry about. Not the one that's going to and fro and looking, the one that's trying to destroy and has legions. Let's go on. Ezekiel 1:22. Spread out above the heavens the living creatures, what was looked something like a vault, sparkling like crystal and awesome. Under the vault their wings were stretched out one toward the other, and each had 2 wings covering its body. What do we find on the Ark of the Covenant? When the creatures moved, I heard the sound of their wings, like the roar of rushing waters, like the voice of the Almighty, like the tumult of an army. When they stood still, they lowered their wings. Then there came a voice from above the vault over the heads and stood with lowered wings. Above the vault over their heads was what looked like a throne of lapis lazuli, and high above the throne was a figure like that of a man. I saw that from what appeared to be his waist up, he looked like a glowing metal. So, who do you think is on this tabernacle in the heavenlies? All these angels are surrounding him. All these are surrounding him. And he's saying there's only one gate you're coming into. There's only one way to look in towards. There's only one way I want you to worry about. Are we going to be worthy to enter that gate? Are we going to be worthy to understand the mysteries of Yahweh? Will we be able to go through the fire and come out and say, Father, thank you, I made it. Father, thank you for helping me. Because when we go through the fire, and you notice, if you'll read about the tabernacle, everything they had went through the fire. All these metals, all this gold, all these things went through the fire. And if it didn't make it through the fire, it was not worthy of being a part of the tabernacle. All that gold, all that silver was fired. It went through the fire. The Ark of the Covenant, everything was tested by fire. So when we go through these things in life and we go, man, this is some terrible stuff, I just don't get it. That's not, it's human. It's just human. What in the world have I done? Why is this happening to me? What? The murmuring is different than the what. Don't mistake it. The murmuring is different than the what. You stub your toe. You want to see what you stubbed your toe on. There's nothing wrong with that. What in the world did I stub my toe on? Why is it here? Why is it there? But then to complain about it, to worry and go on about it, that's the problem. Oh, I should have never stubbed my toe. I'm more righteous than anybody. That is the murmur, complaining he don't want to hear. The finding out why. What did I do? Where did I go wrong? That's a whole different conversation, right? Yahweh, show me. Yahweh, forgive me. Yahweh, help me. I would be careful in even saying humble me, because that can be horrific. That can be a terrible thing. Something you don't want to pray damnation on yourself. You need to humble yourself. Watch what praise, what comes out of your mouth. Watch what you're saying, right? So inside the blessed Holy of Holies in the sacred veil, we are coming to meet with Yahweh. We're coming to meet with the Most High. We are going to meet with Him regardless. We really are. We're going to meet with Him, and He's either going to say, well done, thou good and faithful, or depart from me, you worker of iniquity, lawlessness. Make no mistake how great your pastor is, your church is, you love the people, and on and on and on. Make no mistake. If we don't know the tabernacle, if we don't know Exodus, if we don't know the story, if we don't understand, then how can we get it? How do we know what's going on? Ezekiel 46:1. Thus saith Yahweh Elohim, the gate of the inner court that looketh toward the east shall be shut 6 working days, but on the Sabbath it shall be open, and in the day of the new moon it shall be open. Again, in the day of the full moon, and in most versions it says full moon or new moon, full moon, but in the day of the full moon it shall be open. Why would it be open on the full moon? Because on the full moon, again, you can only see the full moon through the east gate, looking to the east. No other moon can you tell. One of my friends, Joey, Light of Yahshua Ministries in Mobile, used to have it. He would always follow that crescent moon. And he walked out there one night after we had Sabbath, and he says, there it is. There it is, the moon. And he was looking to the west, not the east. And it struck me, he's not looking in the right direction. He's not looking in the commanded direction. But when you tell people, they don't listen. They don't hear. They don't always listen, I should say. Yahweh, forgive me. But what's commanded is what we see. And when you get that unction of, or he flat tells you just like that, he's looking in the wrong direction. It's not a condemning to him. It's not a put down to him. It's the truth. So the point I'm trying to make is not condemning him or anyone else, because I gave him Bible verses and showed him Bible verses, Psalms 81:3 and all that. But my point is not, again, condemnation. It's many are going to do traditions of men. Many are going to follow the Jewish traditions. Many are going to pick up things that they don't even know what they're doing and say, well, the mass crowd is doing it, so I'm going to do what they do. How am I going to have Sukkot with me and you and Bobby Sue? Well, if that's all there is, that's all there is, brother and sister. That's all we need, obviously. Well, I can't do Sukkot, and I've heard this. Well, I can't do Sukkot because how am I going to do Sukkot? They're on the wrong dates. They're on the different dates. You're saying that I'm supposed to just do it by my lonesome, or I'm supposed to do it by myself. I'm not saying anything other than do it on the right dates. You take it up with Yahweh. Is it okay to go to other people and talk with them and be with them on those dates? Again, prayer, supplication. But all that to know this, that there's so much in the tabernacle. There's so much in what's going on here. Again, we had to look through the east gate. We have to. And even in the new millennium, even in the after, it talks of the feast days. Why can't we get them right now? Don't you think it'd be better for us and everybody involved if we had it right now? Instead of saying, well, he's going to tell us what's right. At what point can he tell us what's right? At what point can he just say, well, you guys was just all mixed up. You guys just didn't know what was going on. You guys just didn't know how to handle it. Right? Is he going to say that? Do you think the Creator, do you think Yahshua went through all that to say, oh, you guys just mixed it all up? If we look at how intricate, how important, how what he said, how the tabernacle was built, how everything was put together, the details of it, and how he gave it to Moses. He gave it to Moses and told Moses to build it the way that I showed you. All these things, if we're not careful, I believe should be a part of our life. It should be a part of our learning. It should be a part of what we are listening, watching, doing, and being a part of. Because without his word, without his manna, without what he says to do, and without learning the beginning, that's where so many churches don't want you. Why would they not want you to learn the beginning? Oh, don't even touch the dough. Start in the New Testament. That's what the biggest thing I hear anymore. Start in the New Testament. Where should I start? In the New Testament. In the New Testament? Yeah, start reading Matthew. Start reading this. Start reading. What about Genesis? What about Exodus? What about... If I don't know, they murmur and complain, they got in trouble. Then can I murmur and complain and get in trouble? Am I really going to say... Well, you know, he had the atonement for me, and he did the atonement for me, and he did these things for me, but, you know, I'm just going to say I'm sorry. Yahweh, forgive us. You know, we say dumb things and we do dumb things. Yahweh, forgive us for doing the things that we have done that's come out of our mouth. But the more that we learn, the more that we see that his tabernacle and his gate is what we want to go through. And the more that we understand, it's not an easy way. Was he referencing this gate when he talked about the camel? Was he referencing that it's easier for a rich man to do what? To go through the eye of a camel? According to some sources, there is a little place there in Jerusalem that's called the Eye of the Camel, and it's a very, very hard place to go through. And not but one person at a time can get through it. So sometimes we're going to be in that point where just you, or it seems like it's just you, is going through it. I would submit to you that you call upon Yahweh and you ask him, and you talk with him, and you pray with him, and you atone with him to find that gate. Because eternity is way too long to say, I made a mistake. Eternity is way, way, way too long to say, oh, I got it wrong. You know, it's just way too long to say, I wish I would have done it different. I wish I would have done it better. I wish this, I wish that. I just wish. Because that's way too long to not make it to that gate. Yahshua said he provided the manna, right? Again, we have to go with what so saith Yahshua, what so saith Yahweh. We have to do and watch and learn the tabernacle and what is in it, what's it about, what's it for, who's it for. There's so much into it. And there's so much more into it that we could go over, more dimensions and more things. But that's pretty much, you know, about how it goes, about what Yahshua not only Yahshua, but the coming kingdom, Yeshua's coming kingdom, Yahweh's kingdom. And I believe it's start from finish. He knew when he made that tabernacle, when he gave it to Moses, he knew what it represented. And he knew that you and me could glean and understand if we would read and understand and listen. So again, Yahweh, forgive us for not being better stewards, for not understanding more of what he has said, for not digging into this before, But we can only do what we can do. We don't beat ourselves up, because if we do, we'll spend more time beating ourselves up than we could be learning. We repent humbly, and we know, and that's it. That's the affliction. I know I did wrong. Father, forgive me. But after that, we got to keep going. We have to learn. We have to learn. We have to learn. Because if we're not careful, we'll spend more time. I murmured and I complained and I did this, and we'll spend more time in that than getting further down the road. So, yes, we repent. Yahweh, forgive us. We bring it to the tabernacle. We bring it to him, and we give it to him as the high priest, and we do atonement. We do his feast days, but then we say, Father, what's next? As a servant, where do you want me to be? And if we would do that, what kind of world would this be? Just a few of us, just the remnant. What kind of world could we make? Could we shape? Could we have if we would do our duty? If we would do our diligence? The sick, the homeless, the people that want to listen. I'm not saying everybody, because I talk to homeless, and some of them, they do drugs, they do this, they do that. They're not going to quit. They don't want to. They would not jump in the car and leave with you because they have their own things. But those who willingly want to, those who want to know Yahweh, those lost sheep are out there. So let's find them. Let's look for them. Let's ask them, are you the sheep? Are you the lost? Are you looking? Do you know Yahweh? And if they look at you like you lost your mind and get red in the face and try to cuss you out for it, then move on. Don't dwell on them. Dwell on Yahweh. So I hope this is edified. I hope it helps. I know there's more, but I hope this has helped. It's went kind of lengthy, but there's so much to it. There's so much than just, some things we can go over, but it takes so long in research, and, this is nothing in the time that I've researched into it. Some of these things are 8 to 10 hours or longer just making one of these, and people say, oh my gosh, it's long. There's more. We could go over that. You could probably do a week study on this alone and still keep learning throughout the week. But I believe that's what Sukkot is. And I believe that's what his feast days are, to teach us. So, if you want to come along next year, Yahweh willing, let's Sukkot. Let's learn. Let's find out more of what so saith Yahweh. So until next time, may Yahweh bless you, may his kindness shine upon you, and may he grant you shalom. Shalom, thank you very much for listening and for watching. May Yahweh bless you. Shalom and blessing.